Now I pin these two together. This is the back side pocket to the other back side. Make sure you put it right side to right side. Pin, stitch, and top stitch. Exactly what we just did. Now for the belt is very simple. We lay this piece over this, and this piece over this. We pin, and pin. Then we stitch, we open, we fold everything towards the center, and do the top stitch. Alright, this is going to seem way more complicated than it actually is. We want the wrong side up on the bottom to the wrong side up on the top. Normally if you'd stitch this, you'd have an exposed seam, but since we have a belt, that covers everything up nice and neat. What I normally do is start at the middle, which is our marker right here, and I pin this whole thing down. Let's do that now. Now for the belt, we take the right side to right side and pin them. Once it's all pinned, it's stitched all the way across and then top stitched. So now we open it up, we top stitch on this, a normal 1 mil from the edge. I will need my glasses for this. Now I only put one top stitch on here because it makes dealing with the elastic so much easier. This is how I measure up my elastic, right? We have the back panel that gets the elastic. It's the midpoint, that's midpoint. So if I cut it right there, when I stretch it out, it'll just conform in just enough. So I go 3/4 of the way, cut. Since we have everything out, I'm gonna do all my measuring now. We're gonna measure from the top edge here down 2 inches, put in a mark all the way around. Then we're gonna fold and pin all the way around. Just a mark a couple inches. And then when you pin, you want to make sure you try and pick up a little bit of the under fabric. Now this can just as easily be pressed as it is pinned. So if you feel better with an iron, iron it out. Continue pinning and moving and pinning and moving. All right, take our elastic. I tend to put it along the side seam just so there's more meat for the stitch to grab into. We're just gonna do a zigzag seam back and forth a couple of times right there. When you stitch this, make sure there's no fabric underneath, make sure it's nice and smooth, and then just stitch back and forth a few times. Now we're going to lay everything out, pin to the middle, back, and then do a top stitch, just like we did on the first part. Now I tend to start pinning just past the middle point, because we want to stitch just past it. Just pin it down. Whenever I have a spot that I need to stop at, I tend to put a double pin in, just so if I'm doing what I'm doing and not paying attention, I know exactly where to stop. I also like, I remember where I put my glasses. I also like pinning the side next, try and line everything up as best I can. Nice thing about this polypoplin is it's relatively forgiving. It'll stretch if it has to in places. So if I'm kind of snug here, it'll stretch itself out. Not to mention this is going to be all bunched with elastic, so if it's a little puckered, nobody's going to notice. This is not couture, this is costuming. Although I suppose in a sense couture is costuming too. And then just lay it across and pin. Make sure it's nice and even. If you have loose threads, try and tuck them in. Just pin all the way across. When we're done, we're going to do a single top stitch, 1 mil in from the edge, just like we did here. Just one all the way across. Now if you're OCD and that single stitch on top bothers you and you have to have a double, you can do a double and still fit the elastic in. You just have to be very careful when you pin or when you stitch that you don't stitch through the elastic. I am not terribly worried about it, so I'm not going to bother. All right, now that we're past the halfway point, we can just pull on the elastic. It's a decent amount of elastic. Put a pin through the whole thing, just past the middle point. Make sure you go through the elastic. And then we can reinforce stitch this to this seam here, because this is our other hip seam. And then just go back and forth over this a couple of times. We'll lay it out and pin it the other way. We pin it just like we did last time. I'm going to start at the side seam and work my way across, and then I'm going to work my way back. Now on this, I'm going to pull this seam we have holding the elastic in place, straighten it out just a little bit, and then repin. We do a top stitch just like this, and then the belt is done. Excuse me. Next is zippers. Zippers aren't complicated, they're just annoying. As long as we take it step by step, we'll be fine.